The fallout from last week's homicide is being felt far and wide. So who's going to turn down the temperature on what is going on? Hi, I'm Melba Pearson, also known as the Resident Legal Diva, and this is The Breakdown. If you're liking this content, be sure to subscribe to Legal AF, like, comment, and share with a friend. So, as we know, there was the homicide that's now been heard around the world that occurred last week on September 10th, and that would be the homicide of Charlie Kirk. Now, that is going to be a whole other story in terms of the criminal justice process, which I'm going to be breaking down in a series of videos coming up. But I want to focus today on the fallout from his death. On September 11th, 6 HBCUs received threats and went into lockdown. Those universities included Alabama State University, Hampton University, Clark Atlanta University, Southern University, Bethune-Cookman University, Virginia State University, and Spelman College. And they all went on lockdown due to direct threats or potential threats to their campuses. Other HBCUs also took precautions, like FAMU here in my state of Florida, in terms of, hey, we see what's going on over there. This could easily spill over to us. Let's lock down our campuses as well. Now, backing up for a second, how did we get here? Right. So we know that Charlie Kirk was murdered by Tyler Robinson on September 10th. But before the actual evidence and all the facts and everything came to light, there was this undercurrent that somehow it was a person of color that did it. All right. So let's analyze that, because logic should have dictated that a person of color was not in the frame here. But let's break this down. So the demographic of Utah, Black people make up 12% of the population. Probably the most high-profile Black Utah resident that folks know of is Mary Cosby from The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. And I will say, as someone who's been to Salt Lake City for a conference, beautiful city, so clean, ridiculously clean, super clean. But the only other Black person I saw was the other lady that came with me to the conference. So, gonna be kind of hard if you're going to commit a crime as a person of color, because you basically won't blend in and you'd easily be caught. So there's that. And then there's also the one aspect that folks keep forgetting about, or conveniently forgetting about, is that crime by its very nature is intraracial, not interracial. And the Bureau of Justice Statistics have clearly shown that through their record keeping over the years. The rate of crime between white people, so being a white perpetrator or white victim, is about 4 times the rate of a Black perpetrator harming a white victim. So there's that. The numbers just don't bear it out. 57% of crimes involving white victims were committed by white perpetrators, according to these statistics, while only 15% were committed by African Americans and 11% by people of Hispanic heritage. Black crime victims, similar kind of story. 63% of crimes were committed by Black perpetrators, while 11% were committed by white perpetrators and 6.6% committed by people of Hispanic descent. So, again, the numbers are clear here. The likelihood is high that it would have been somebody who was white. But now HBCUs ended up feeling the fallout from this and getting a whole bunch of threats. Why? People had nothing to do with it. So that being problematic and traumatic, because you think about the professors at each of those campuses, they're all freaking out like, listen, I didn't come to work to die. The students are like, hey, I'm just here to learn. Like, why am I now sheltering in place, hiding in my dorm, freaking out, not knowing what's going to happen next? The parents, think about the parents and the families of the kids who are now traumatized as a result of these threats. So again, how is this helping anything? There's that. And also, I have to note that the governor of Utah said something very interesting and this was part of the press conference announcing Tyler Robinson's arrest. He said, "It was my prayer it wasn't one of us, that it was someone who drove from out of state, came from another country." That prayer was not answered. Kind of a strange prayer, if you ask me. But be that as it may, kind of begging for logic to prevail here. All right. So we've been here before, but it is still a very troubling road that we're on. And I want to talk about where that road could lead and kind of figure out, is there a way that us as a collective, as a country, can turn directions, can get off this path, because it does not lead to anything good. So we've been here before in terms of, in 2017, think about the Unite the Right rally. Now, this was in Charlottesville in Virginia. And this was the instance where you had the Unite the Right folks who came out with their tiki torches and their khaki shorts and were, chanting different things that were very problematic. And there were counter protests. And during one of the counter protests the next day, Heather Heyer was murdered by a white extremist who drove his car into a crowd of people, killing her and injuring others. We almost, and a lot of folks don't know this, we almost had the same thing happen in Florida because another affiliated white extremist wanted to hold a talk at a campus here in Florida. And I will give credit to then Florida Governor Rick Scott. He was like, listen, you can come say what you have to say, but there's not going to be any foolishness. And he called every member of law enforcement from every corner of the state and locked the city down. He was like, go, say what you got to say. Freedom of speech. Cool. But you're not, you or your followers are not going to cause violence in my state. And it's very rare that now Senator Rick Scott and I are on the same page. But that was when we were lockstep, because I was like, come on. And what also was quite beautiful in terms of nonviolent resistance, the students at the university, a lot of them went and got tickets to the event, but didn't attend. So the white extremist was sitting there on his own, basically with like a small handful of people in a large auditorium, because the students were like, no, we don't co-sign this message and we don't want to hear what you have to say. So again, a productive way to do it versus using violence, right? So that was one way to handle it. And again, remember, the First Amendment guarantees you a right to speak, but it doesn't guarantee you an audience. So there's that. But who is going to take the temperature down so this doesn't get completely out of hand? We're not seeing that sort of tone and tenor coming from the White House. Kind of quite the opposite. There's a lot of finger pointing and blaming and all of that, even though elected officials that are on the progressive side of things have all condemned this, have all said that this wasn't okay and that violence has no place in our political discourse. But we don't see the temperature coming down at all. And we're seeing now people getting attacked for, saying things on social media, people losing their jobs as a result, people getting doxed. And for those who don't know what doxing is, it's basically the revealing of someone's address, location, job, so that folks can attack them either online or in person. So we're seeing an increase of that. And that's incredibly problematic. So I just want to give an example from my own personal perspective as to why I'm deeply, deeply concerned, and I hope all of you are too. So I grew up in a Caribbean household. My mother was Trinidadian, my father's Jamaican, and this is something that's very central to my identity. So of course, growing up in a Caribbean household, you'll listen to talk radio, whether you wanted to or not. Talk radio was always in the background. And part of the narrative when I was growing up was about the intense political violence that was going on in Jamaica. And this was between the two major parties, the PNP and the JLP. Not taking sides on either one, just gonna give you all the facts. So by the time we got to December of 1976, yes, I'm that old. By the time you got around to those elections, more than 160 serious crimes were being committed each week in the name of politics. Now, there's a few other aspects involved. There was some gang violence, and then the gang started to take the side of, I support JLP, I support PNP. So some of it was gang violence under the cover of politics, but some of it was just legit political violence because, hey, I don't like your side. So Bob Marley played a role in this. So him and his wife, Rita, were about to do a concert called Smile Jamaica. This was going to be a free concert that was organized by the government at the time, the sitting government at the time, which was the PNP government, because again, they wanted to diffuse tensions. They were like, this is craziness that people are dying over politics. So he's set to go perform at this concert. But 2 days before, a gunman who assumed because he was performing at this concert that he was in support of PNP, this gunman went and tried to kill Bob Marley and Rita Marley. Came to his house, shot him up. And the interesting thing was, again, Bob Marley wasn't into politics like that. He was all about peace, love, bringing people together. So he was not weighing in on one side or the other. This was just an assumption because of the fact that he was performing at this concert. So luckily, the two of them survived. And it was literally an act of God that they survived, because Bob Marley was struck in the sternum and the bicep, and Rita Marley was shot in the head. But thankfully, both of them recovered fully, and Bob Marley went on to perform at the Smile Jamaica concert 2 days later. But as a result of that, he bounced. He was like, all right, I'm out of Jamaica for the next few years. I'm not dealing with this foolishness, because I just want to make music and I'm not trying to get shot over something that I'm not involved in. But he did come back 2 years later because two rival leaders, not political leaders, but more gang leaders, decided, hey, this is getting out of hand. Let's figure out a way to calm the tensions. I think Bob Marley could be the one to bring everyone together. So they asked him, and he was like, all right, fine, I'll come back. So April 22nd, 1978, Bob Marley had the One Love concert. And he brought both of the leaders together, and that was Norman Manley and Edward Seaga. And when I say those two are like powerhouses in Jamaican politics, I mean huge, right? Like Norman Manley, the airport in Kingston is named after him. Edward Seaga has a whole highway named after him, right? So these are major people. So he brought them both together on stage. Neither one knew that the other was going to be there. He brought them on stage and put their hands together in this show of unity, and the crowd went nuts. And this was something that was credited as the turning point, as number one, a major event in Jamaican history, but it was also heralded as a turning point in the violence. Now, it didn't end overnight. The violence kind of went on probably until the mid 80s or so, but still it was credited as the moment that things shifted. So my concern is that we're headed down the same path. And who would be the person to diffuse the tensions? Who's going to bring this down a notch? Normally, again, you look to the presidency. You look to those like thought leaders, the folks who really have the ear of the people to be like, hey, listen, let's chill. Let's take a breather here. Let's not go tit for tat and have all this violence going on. But we're not seeing that now. So who's that person going to be? How are we going to get to this place? How are we going to get off this path of violence? Because political violence doesn't end well. Doesn't serve anybody. Basically, everything ends up in ashes and embers and what? For what? So I'm curious. I want to hear from y'all. Sound off in the comments. Who do you think can diffuse the tensions now so that we can get to a more peaceful place? Or is it too late? Food for thought. I'm Melba Pearson, also known as the Resident Legal Diva, and this was The Breakdown. Take care.
In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories, the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.